I caught Karen's son crawling through the cureeds behind my workshop with a gas can in one hand and a lighter in the other, and the bastard was smiling. Thing is, I wasn't even mad. Not really, I was just wondering how the hell it escalated from a casual swim in my lake to attempted arson. Think you know where this is going? Yeah, I doubt it. You're in for one hell of a ride. My dad used to say there were only two kinds of people in this world, the kind who mind their own damn business and the kind who can't sleep unless they're sticking their nose in yours. He said it while standing on the same dock I still fish from, tossing a beer can into the cooler and watching the sun drop into the lake like it had nowhere better to be. That dock, the lake, the woods behind the house, all of it's mine now, or at least it's supposed to be. I live out near Lakewood, tucked between the pines and just far enough from the chaos of town to forget it exists. The house isn't fancy. It's the same little A-frame cabin my dad built with his own hands back in the 70s. No HOA, no streetlights, no perfectly trimmed hedges, just trees, water, and quiet. It's not the kind of place you stumble onto by accident. You have to know where you're going, which is why when people do show up uninvited, I already know something's off. I make custom furniture, real stuff, not the plywood garbage you get at chain stores. I work alone in the shop out back, and I like it that way. I get up, I sand, I cut, I listen to music, and sometimes, when the sun's just right, I take a cold beer down to the dock and pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist. It's peaceful, simple, predictable, and ever since my wife passed 6 years ago, it's been my way of staying sane. We never had kids. Tried for a while, but life had other plans. When she got sick, I put everything else on hold. Took care of her right here, in this house, where she could still hear the loons on the lake in the morning and smell the cedar from my workshop drifting through the screen doors. After she was gone, I thought about selling, packing it all up and moving somewhere new. But I couldn't. This place, it's not just land and wood. It's her. It's my dad. It's everything I've ever loved that isn't breathing anymore. You don't sell that. You protect it. Thing is, Lakewood used to be just a few old cabins scattered around the lake, mostly folks who came up for the summer and knew to mind their own, but that changed. Somewhere along the way, developers got involved. They paved the roads, threw up those shiny new modern lake homes, and slapped a fancy name on it, Lakewood Estates. Gated entrance, security cameras, monthly dues, and of course a homeowners association, run by the kind of people who think community means telling you how high your grass should be and what color you're allowed to paint your front door. But here's the kicker, my property's never been part of it. My dad bought the land long before there was ever a Lakewood Estates. His deed's clean, his boundaries are locked in, and there's no clause, no fine print, no loophole that ties me to their little suburban kingdom. I'm the outlier. The guy with no fence, no dues, no neighbors within 100 yards. And for a long time, that was fine. Until she moved in. Karen Sloan. Platinum blonde bob. Tennis visor like she just stepped off a yacht, always in those workout leggings even though no one's ever seen her break a sweat. Moved into the big corner lot across the inlet, right where the HOA trail wraps around the lake. People say she came from out east somewhere, brought cash and attitude, and within weeks of arriving, she was already calling meetings and shaking up the board. I met her for the first time when I was pulling bluegill off the dock. She came walking down the trail with a little clipboard, smile like a sales pitch, said she was just getting to know the neighborhood, asked if I'd thought about joining the HOA. I laughed, not to be rude, just out of reflex, and told her I wasn't a member and didn't intend to be. She tilted her head like I'd just spoken Greek and said something like, "Oh, well, we'll have to look into that." Should have known then she wasn't just making conversation, but back then I figured she was just another bored transplant trying to feel important. Happens a lot in these kinds of communities. They show up, think they're building Mayberry, and start sending out newsletters about trash can placement and mailbox etiquette. Usually they burn out after a year or two. I wasn't worried. Hell, I barely thought about it. I had cedar to mill and a commission deadline for a couple in Denver. Life went on. Birds chirped, sawdust flew, fish bit, and every now and then I'd see her walking by on that trail, checking things off her clipboard like she was cataloging the whole damn forest. Nothing weird, nothing threatening, not yet. But looking back, I think that was when it started. When she saw my dock and realized I had the only direct private access to the water. No shared benches, no posted hours, no keycard gate. Just a worn little trail from my back porch through the trees, straight to the best damn fishing spot in the whole damn county. And from that moment on, she wanted it. It started with a letter, plain white envelope, no stamp, just slipped under my front door like some passive-aggressive fortune cookie. HOA logo printed in the corner, all official looking, like it was from the IRS or something. I remember standing there in my socks, coffee in hand, staring at it for a solid minute before opening it. I already had a good idea of who it was from, but I figured I'd give it a chance. Maybe it was an invitation to a neighborhood barbecue. You know, some gesture of goodwill. Spoiler, it wasn't. Inside was a neatly typed Welcome to the Lakewood Community packet, stapled at the top, complete with bylaws, rules of conduct, a dues schedule, and, this part made me laugh, a personalized note at the end in looping, swoopy cursive. We'd love for you to become an official part of our beautiful lake family. Let's build something amazing together. Signed, of course, by Karen Sloan, HOA president. Now, a normal person might have just tossed the letter and moved on, and that's what I did. At first, I didn't even bother responding. I mean, what was there to say? They had no legal claim over my property. My deed is older than most of their houses. Hell, my dock's older than some of the residents. I figured it was just one of those overzealous neighborly things. Someone playing make-believe mayor and trying to pad their resume with fake community outreach. A couple days later, though, I noticed something odd. I was coming back from town, truck bed full of lumber, when I saw a couple of kids running down the trail that leads to my dock. Not unusual in itself. Kids wander, but they weren't just passing through. They had floaties, towels, a damn Bluetooth speaker. Blaring top 40 garbage, they were settling in. By the time I parked and walked down, there were 5 of them, all high school age maybe, splashing around in the shallow end like they were at a public pool. Shoes kicked off on my dock. A half-eaten bag of Doritos wedged between the boards. One of them had even strung up a hammock between 2 of my trees. My trees! I cleared my throat, loud enough to cut through the noise. They looked up like I was the weird one. I asked them, polite as I could manage, what they were doing on private property. One of the boys, skinny, shaggy-haired, the kind of kid who thinks everything's funny, it told me Karen said we could. I just stood there, trying to process that sentence. I asked, Karen who? He shrugged. The HOA lady. She said the lake's for everyone. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who yells at kids even when they're being smartasses. I told them to gather their stuff and head out. They didn't argue much, which I appreciated, but as they left, one of the girls turned around and said, "You don't have to be so mean, it's just water." That one stuck with me. It's just water. I cleaned up their mess, pulled the hammock down, and sat at the edge of the dock for a while, letting the silence soak back in. But the whole time I had this buzzing in my head. The kind that only shows up when you know something small just shifted and that it's not gonna stop there. The next morning, Karen showed up. No warning, no call, just appeared at the edge of my property like she was inspecting a damn crime scene. She had this tight little smile on her face, clipboard in hand like always. "Hope the kids didn't cause too much trouble," she said, like they were her grandkids visiting a park. They thought the lake was community space. Totally innocent mistake. I told her plainly, it's not. I own the shoreline, the dock, the trees, the trail, all of it. My deed says so. She tilted her head. Really? That's surprising. Our maps show the shoreline as HOA adjacent, with shared lake access. I looked her right in the eye. Your maps are wrong. She gave me that kind of laugh people do when they're pretending to find something amusing, but really just stalling. Well, maybe we should sit down sometime and go over the documents. It might be good for us to get aligned. Nobody wants unnecessary tension around here. Then she looked past me toward the dock, like she was appraising it. It's lovely, by the way. You've kept it in such great shape. Would be a shame if it ever got damaged. I didn't say a word, just stood there, because in that moment, I felt it. The shift, like when the temperature drops right before a storm. She wasn't suggesting or inviting or misunderstanding. She was probing. Testing the water, seeing how far she could push without me pushing back. She waved goodbye like we were old friends, turned on her heel, and disappeared back up the trail. Her perfume lingered in the air, something expensive and sour. It would have been easy to shrug it off. One letter, one visit, a few kids at the dock. Not exactly a full-blown attack. But something about the way she looked at my land, like it was already hers, stuck with me. That was the first time I realized this wasn't just going to go away. She wanted something, and she wasn't used to hearing no. A couple weeks after the whole Just Water episode, I noticed a new sign staked into the ground at the entrance to the HOA trailhead. It had that polished plastic sheen with bold navy letters and the Lakewood Estates logo at the top. Community lake access now open, it said, with an arrow pointing straight down toward my dock. I just stood there and stared at it, didn't touch it, didn't pull it out, didn't even blink for a minute. I wanted to make sure I was reading it right, that I wasn't just hallucinating from sanding cedar in the sun too long. But nope, there it was, a literal sign pointing people directly to my property. So I did the obvious thing. Walked home, grabbed my drill, and screwed in a fresh private property no trespassing sign right on the dock's post. Bright red letters. Big. Not cute or polite like the last one. I figured that'd send the message. That same afternoon, the sign disappeared. Tane. Gone. Clean post. Not snapped or ripped off. Unscrewed. Like someone took their sweet time removing it without making a mess. That was the part that got to me. It wasn't vandalism. It was surgical, intentional. Someone wanted me to know it wasn't just kids messing around. The next day, I found a flyer in my mailbox. HOA newsletter. Glossy as ever. Big headline across the front. Lakewood Estates takes back its shoreline. Underneath, a little blurb about ongoing efforts to enhance community access, and a smiling photo of Karen holding a coffee mug like she was hosting a damn talk show. And there, plain as day, was a digitally drawn map. Only it wasn't the real map, it was doctored. My property line was blurred, and the trail from my dock was highlighted as a shared amenity zone. I just sat on my porch for a while with that flyer in my hands, flipping it over like maybe there'd be a punchline on the back. There wasn't. Just an ad for some lawn care service and a coupon for frozen yogurt. I called the number listed at the bottom of the flyer. Left a message. Just said I wanted to speak to someone about a possible misprint. Nobody called back. Couple days later, I left another one, still nothing. Then came the courtesy inspection. I was out in the workshop working on a walnut bookshelf for a client when I heard voices outside, not casual neighbor voices. These were official sounding, measured, niru, clipboard voices. I walked out and there were two men, one tall and bald, the other younger, nervous, standing by my dock with safety vests and measuring tape. One of them had a laser level. They were mid-conversation when they noticed me. I asked what they were doing. The tall one said they were conducting a shoreline review on behalf of the HOA. I told them in no uncertain terms that the HOA had no authority on my property. None. Zip donut nada. The nervous one flipped through a folder, said something about a pending update to the community parcel layout. I asked to see the paperwork. He hesitated. I stepped closer and held out my hand. He passed over a few pages. Unofficial stuff, just internal memos and some vague survey sketches. Not county records, not deeds. Just fantasy maps. I handed it back and told them to leave. The tall one didn't argue, just smirked like he'd seen this dance before. As they walked off, I noticed the younger one looking over his shoulder like he wanted to say something. He didn't. Later that week, a letter came from the county zoning department. Said they'd received an anonymous complaint regarding unpermitted structures on my land, namely my dock. Apparently, someone claimed it was encroaching on communal property and needed to be reviewed for safety compliance. I called the zoning office. Thankfully, I knew a guy, Robbie, the same guy who'd approved my deck extension years ago. He pulled up the property records while we were on the phone, said nothing had changed on their end. As far as they were concerned, my land was still exactly where it always was. But he did mention, off the record, that this wasn't the first weird complaint they'd gotten from someone over in Lakewood Estates. They loved to stir the pot, he said, and still, it kept going. Trash started showing up near the trail, Starbucks cups, candy wrappers, crushed beer cans. My place had never been pristine, but this was new, deliberate. I started finding footprints around my workshop too, deep enough in the gravel that they weren't just someone lost on a hike. Once, I found a soggy soccer ball wedged between two trees near the waterline with the name HO Fun Day written on it in Sharpie. I didn't even know they had an HOA Fun Day. And then came the real kicker, a letter from the HOA attorney. Fancy envelope. Gold seal. All the legal pomp you can cram into one page. said I was impeding access to a shared natural resource, and that the HOA had reasonable belief that my property had been incorrectly recorded. They were in the process of formally reviewing the boundary allocation, and I was encouraged to cease enforcement of any personal property restrictions along the shoreline until the review was completed. I nearly laughed out loud. Encouraged to cease enforcement? Like I was a rogue sheriff in an old western. But I didn't laugh, because that was the moment it hit me. They weren't just poking around anymore. They weren't testing the waters. They were laying the groundwork. They were trying to rewrite reality on paper, shift the lines, blur the facts, confuse the process, so that by the time anyone figured out what was happening, they'd already taken what they wanted. Not physically, not with fences or bulldozers, but with forms. Letters, legalese, quiet erasure, and every time I pushed back, it was like they came at me sideways with something new, a warning, a notice, a vague threat wrapped in nice language, death by paperwork. I wasn't even mad yet. Not really, I was still treating it like a stupid misunderstanding that had gotten out of hand, like if I just showed enough proof, they'd back off, like maybe Karen had just gotten a little carried away with her community vision board. But something about her silence, it felt intentional, like she was watching me, waiting to see how far I'd let this go before I snapped. And I'll be honest, a small part of me wanted to believe she'd run out of steam soon, that she'd move on to some other HOA project, like repainting the gazebo or organizing a block party, but that part of me was about to get smacked in the face, because the worst of it hadn't even started yet. I wasn't looking for a war. I know it probably sounds like I was, especially to people who only caught pieces of the story, the signs, the letters, the stare-downs on the trail. But the truth is, I just wanted to live my life and be left alone. I wasn't trying to make a statement or pick a fight. I didn't care what color their mulch was or how often they mowed their lawns. I just wanted to keep my dock, my trees, and my quiet little slice of the lake. So yeah, I tried to settle it. I tried damn hard, actually. The first thing I did was pull together every document I had, the deed, the surveyor's map, the permits my dad filed back when he first built the dock. Some of the paperwork was older than I am, yellowed at the edges and still typed on carbon copy paper, but it was all there, every line, every boundary, crystal clear. My land, my shoreline, no mention of HOA anything. I went down to the county recorder's office in person, waited in a lobby that smelled like carpet glue and government sadness just so I could sit with a clerk named Pam and have her walk me through the official records. Took over an hour. She was kind but tired. You could tell she'd seen her fair share of neighbor feuds and wasn't impressed by another one. But when we got to my parcel, she pulled it up on the screen and tilted it so I could see. "Yep," she said, tapping the boundary line with her pen. "Your property ends right at the water line. Dock's fine. You're clean." That should have been the end of it. I asked her if she could give me something in writing, just to have on hand. She printed out a stamped copy of the parcel map and signed off on it. I folded it like a letter from a lawyer and carried it around in my truck like a badge. Next, I figured I'd try and speak to someone at the HOA directly, not Karen. I already knew where that would go, but someone else. Maybe one of the board members who hadn't been fully indoctrinated yet. Someone reasonable. At the next HOA community meeting, which technically I wasn't even supposed to attend since I wasn't a member, I showed up anyway. It was held in the clubhouse by the tennis courts, the whole place smelling like cucumber water and lavender air freshener. The crowd was mostly retirees and stroller moms. Nobody looked particularly thrilled to be there. I waited until the open comment section, then stood up and introduced myself. "I'm Rick Barnes," I said, loud enough for the room to hear, but calm. "I own the lakefront property at the end of the East Trail. Some of you know me, some of you don't, but I'm here because there's been some confusion about that land, and I want to clear it up." I passed out copies of the deed and the map. Real documents, not the doctored ones Karen had floating around. I kept my voice level, didn't accuse, didn't rant, just facts. Most people stared down at the papers without saying a word. A few looked genuinely surprised. One woman, short, red hair, probably mid-60s, raised her hand and asked if I was sure I wasn't part of the HOA. "It says Lakewood on your tax parcel." "It also says I've been exempt since before the HOA existed," I replied, pointing to the date on the deed. "I've got the legal backing, I've spoken with zoning. I'm not asking for anything. I just want the signs taken down and the messages about community lake access to stop, including my land." You could feel the discomfort settle over the room like a fog, people shifting in their folding chairs, trying to figure out if agreeing with me meant picking a side. Karen, of course, waited until I was done to make her entrance. She wasn't even supposed to be there that night, some out-of-town conference she'd mentioned in the last newsletter. But here she came, striding in like a senator late to a press conference, clipboard in hand, lipstick perfect. "I appreciate Mr. Barnes coming here tonight," she said, like I was a guest speaker, "and I'm sure we can all agree that we want to be good neighbors. But we also have a duty to protect the community's access and shared resources. This isn't about landlines, it's about legacy. Legacy." She said it like it was a courtroom drama, like she was standing up for the people. There were a few nods around the room, a couple of passive, unsure claps. Mostly people just looked tired. I didn't argue with her, just thanked everyone for their time and walked out before my fists started shaking. Over the next few weeks, I tried other angles. I filed a formal complaint with the county citing harassment and attempted property misrepresentation. They took it seriously on paper, but in person, it was more of a shoulder shrug. "If it escalates, let us know," they said. "Until then, it's just a civil dispute." I reached out to a lawyer, one who specializes in real estate. Nice guy, young, ambitious. He looked through everything and told me I had a solid case if it came to that, but warned me it could take months, maybe longer. "They're not trying to win right away," he said. "They're trying to wear you down." That's when it really started to eat at me. The realization that they weren't just pushing me legally, they were betting I'd fold, that I'd get tired of the noise, the paperwork, the signs, the constant low-grade chaos, that I'd just give up. I started keeping records, pictures, emails, timestamps. I took photos of every new footprint on my trail, every piece of trash left by the water. I kept a log in a yellow legal pad and tucked it under my mattress, like some paranoid conspiracy theorist. But it made me feel like I still had some grip on the situation, like I wasn't crazy, even tried talking to a few of the neighbors. Most of them were polite but cagey. One guy, a retired firefighter named Walt, told me off the record that he didn't trust Karen either, said she'd pushed out the last board president by spreading rumors about his taxes. "You're not the first she's come after," he muttered, eyes flicking around like the trees had ears. Jenna, the woman who lived down the road and worked in the county office, offered to quietly check the zoning records now and then. She wasn't taking sides, she said, just watching the wheels turn. But I could tell she was rooting for me. Still, despite all that, nothing really changed. The signs came back. The trail stayed busy. More and more people started treating my dock like a public park. Someone even brought their dog down and let it crap by my fire pit. Didn't even clean it up. Just smiled and said, "Nice spot you've got here." It got to the point where I didn't even enjoy going out there anymore. The dock, the trees, the sound of the water, all of it just felt like it was under siege, like I was guarding something already half stolen, and that's when the doubt started to creep in. Maybe they were right. Maybe it wasn't worth it. Maybe I should just give them access, make peace, keep the rest, sell the shoreline rights, build a new dock further back, be the bigger man. But every time I got close to thinking that, I'd hear my dad's voice, clear as day. "You don't back down just because someone's louder. You stand on the truth or you don't stand at all." I wasn't ready to quit, but I'll be honest, I was close. It happened on a Tuesday, I think, or maybe it was a Thursday. I don't even remember anymore. The days had all started to blend together into this weird mix of frustration and silence. You know that kind of tired where your body's not even sore, but your head just won't shut up? That's where I was. I'd stopped going down to the dock in the evenings, stopped leaving my tools out, started checking the locks on the workshop even though nobody ever broke in. It felt like living under a slow leak. I was working on a coffee table in the shop, sanding the legs smooth when I heard tires on gravel. Not the usual neighbor's golf cart, this was heavier. I looked out the window and saw a sheriff's SUV pulling up the drive. Not the kind of visit you want when you've been getting legal threats and mystery complaints for weeks. I stepped outside, wiping my hands on my jeans. The door opened and out stepped Denny McCall. Deputy Dennis McCall to most, but to me he was just Denny, my godson. He grinned when he saw me, same crooked smile he had as a kid. "Still smell like cedar and stubbornness," he said. I laughed, but I was already on edge. I hadn't talked to Denny in months. We'd kept in touch here and there after his dad, my best friend from high school, passed, but life gets busy. I figured if he was here in uniform, something had gone sideways. "Karen called us," he said, not even bothering to sugarcoat it. "Says you threatened her son?" I blinked. "What?" "Yeah," he said, flipping through his little notepad. "Apparently you yelled at him, shoved him off your dock, and told him to go drown himself. In those exact words." I just stared at him. "Denny, I haven't even seen her kid." He nodded. I figured. but I had to come check it out. Protocol. I could see he wasn't buying it either. He wasn't there to lecture me, he was giving me a heads up. I take it this isn't the first time she's tried something like this? He asked. So I told him. Everything. The signs, the fake maps, the inspection, the letters. He listened, arms crossed, no interruptions. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. She's got nerve, he muttered. Then he looked at me and said something that I'll never forget. You got cameras out here? I pointed toward the side of the shop, little bullet cam tucked under the eave. It wasn't some high-tech setup, just a basic outdoor model I'd slapped up years ago after a black bear tore into my trash cans, but it still worked. Pull the last few days, he said. Let's see what your aggressive behavior looks like. So I did, brought out the laptop I use for design work, pulled the footage, we fast-forwarded through a whole lot of nothing, wind in the trees, a few squirrels, a deer or two, until we landed on the day of the supposed incident. And there he was, Karen's son, Kyle. On my dock, alone, shirtless, blasting music from his phone, drinking something from a silver can. I watched as he walked down the dock, kicked off his shoes, and jumped into the water. A few minutes later, he climbed back out, dried off with a towel, and flipped the bird toward my house. Then he left. No yelling, no pushing, no threats, just a teenage punk being a teenage punk. Want me to add this to the incident report? Denny asked. I nodded, and copy it onto a flash drive. He smiled, already brought one. It would have been enough just to have Denny on my side. That alone felt like a crack in the wall, but it didn't stop there. A few days later, I got a call from the county zoning office. Not Pam this time. This was someone new. Guy named Ellis said he was filling in while Pam was on leave. He'd gotten my formal complaint and wanted to review it in person, see the property lines himself. That alone was unusual. They don't normally do field visits unless something smells funny. Ellis came out that weekend, brought his measuring gear, a clipboard, and a thick binder. I showed him the documents, the landline markers, the original survey stakes that were still half buried under moss along the tree line. He was quiet the whole time, just nodded, measured, checked, scribbled things. Then he asked, "Mind if I show you something?" He flipped open the binder and pulled out a copy of the map the HOA had submitted in one of their filings. I recognized it right away, the same one from that newsletter. The one where my land magically became community shoreline. Only this time, it had an official county stamp on it, like someone had slipped it through a review without ever flagging the change. You see this corner here? Ellis said, pointing with his pen. This wasn't like that last year. It was redrawn sometime in the last 6 months, and the initials on the approval box? He tapped them. Not Pam's, not mine, not anyone in this office, actually. He paused, which means someone faked it. That's when it hit me. They hadn't just bent the rules. They'd forged government documents, tried to pass them off as real in order to claim my land. That wasn't a gray area. That was a felony. And then, just when I thought my jaw couldn't drop any further, Jenna stopped by. She knocked on my door that night holding a manila envelope. No words, just handed it to me and said, "You didn't get this from me." Then she turned and walked away. Inside were copies of internal HOA emails. Real ones, with headers and signatures and meeting notes. One of them, from Karen herself, talked about how remapping the shoreline would ease resistance and open up negotiation leverage with Rick Barnes. Yes. Another discussed the temporary removal of signage and how any legal blowback could be delayed by citing community good faith. There it was, in black and white. They weren't confused. They weren't mistaken. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were trying to steal from me. Slowly, quietly, and they were getting damn close to pulling it off. But not anymore. Not after this, because now I had something I hadn't had since the whole mess began. Proof, and that changed everything. I sat at my kitchen table long after the sun went down, envelope from Jenna on one side of me, flash drive from Denny on the other, and my old yellow legal pad smack in the middle. There was a whiskey glass in my hand, half empty, mostly for the ritual of it. I wasn't drinking to relax, I was drinking to focus. It was the first time in months I didn't feel powerless. Up until then, I'd been playing defense, blocking shots, swatting flies, just trying to hold on to what was mine. But now? Now I had something they couldn't spin or bury. I had their lies in writing, their scheme laid out like a blueprint. It was all sitting there, right in front of me, and I knew exactly what I had to do. Not explode, not throw a fit, not post some rant on Facebook that would make me look like another angry old guy yelling at clouds. No, if I was going to end this, I had to be smarter than they were. I had to be patient, strategic, relentless. I started with the documents from Ellis, the zoning guy. After he confirmed the forgery, I asked him to give me a notarized letter stating what he'd found. Took a couple days and a few nudges, but he sent it over, plain, direct, and stamped with the county seal. That letter was gold. Not a smoking gun, but enough to prove the HOA's map wasn't just wrong, it was fraudulent. It put them in a corner, legally speaking. Next, I got back in touch with my lawyer, Chris Young Guy, sharp as hell, and the only person I'd met in months who seemed genuinely excited about taking on the HOA. I dropped the envelope and flash drive on his desk and told him, "I'm done waiting, let's go." He leaned back, flipped through the papers, and said, "All right, time to flip the script." Over the next few weeks, we built the case, and I don't mean we just dumped everything into a folder and called it a day. We built it like a damn house, every brick laid clean, every nail in place. Chris had a friend in the state attorney's office, a guy who owed him a favor, and through that connection, we quietly submitted a packet of documents, the altered map, the fake signature, the HOA internal emails. No grand declarations, just the facts. Let the paper speak for itself. At the same time, I kept playing it cool on the surface. No arguments with Karen, no public moves. I even waved when I saw her walking her dog, just to keep her guard down. She still had that smug look on her face like she was winning, like she thought I was worn out, beaten down, ready to fold. Let her think that. Behind the scenes, I was also reaching out to neighbors again. A few of them had started coming around, especially after the zoning visit. Walt, the retired firefighter, was one of the first to say something. He came by with a six-pack and a quiet, "You were right all along." Said a few of the other residents had started asking questions after the maps didn't match up at the last HOA meeting. Turns out I wasn't the only one getting weird vibes. I was just the only one making noise. I looped Jenna back in, too. I didn't pressure her, just kept her in the loop, careful not to put her in a position that could cost her job. But she kept an ear to the ground and slipped me a few useful updates when she could. Meeting schedules. Complaint logs, email threads she accidentally saw. She never said much, but I could tell she was rooting for me harder than ever. Even Denny stayed close. Not officially, of course. He had a badge to protect him. But he made it clear that if anything got hairy, he'd be there. "Just don't shoot first," he said. I hate doing paperwork on family. I started documenting everything in triplicate, every message, every visit, every person who walked too close to my dock. Photos, timestamps, even audio recordings on my phone if I sensed something was about to go sideways. Chris said it was overkill. I didn't care. I wasn't taking chances. The last piece of the puzzle came from the archives. Chris filed a public records request and dug up an old HOA document from about 10 years ago, one that had been approved by the county when Lakewood Estates first tried to expand its borders. In that document was a clearly marked exclusion zone, my land. The HOA had signed off on it themselves back then. It was their own damn signature, their own admission that I wasn't part of them. And that map, unlike Karen's fantasy version, was legit, county stamped, recorded, untouchable. When Chris saw it, he laughed. They basically signed their own death certificate and forgot about it. So we built the plan like this. Step 1, deliver all of it to the Attorney General's office anonymously. Let them chew on the fraud and forgery angle. Step 2, file a cease and desist with full evidence demanding the HOA immediately retract any statements or signage related to my land. Step 3, prepare a civil suit for damages just in case they pushed back. But the real twist, we weren't going to send anything until the next public HOA meeting because I wanted to look Karen in the eye when the rug got yanked out from under her. That's the thing about people like her. They don't expect you to push back, not with actual fire. They expect noise, tantrums, bluffing. They think if they keep swinging long enough, you'll get tired of blocking. But I wasn't tired anymore. I was ready. The meeting was held in the usual spot, the HOA clubhouse with its fake wood paneling, flickering LED lights, and folding chairs that made your back hurt just from looking at them. The kind of room where you could practically smell the passive aggression baked into the drywall. I showed up in jeans and a flannel, not to make a scene, just to make a point. That I wasn't hiding, that I wasn't intimidated, that this wasn't a tantrum or some last-ditch plea. It was business. Karen saw me the second I walked in. She was near the front, leaning over one of the long tables, whispering something to the secretary. She froze mid-sentence when our eyes met. And I swear, for the briefest second, I saw it. Not fear, not guilt, but confusion. like she genuinely didn't understand why I was still standing. Good. Let her wonder. The meeting dragged for a while. Budget updates, landscaping proposals, complaints about speeding golf carts, the usual HOA theater. I waited. Calm. Quiet. Not a twitch. Chris sat beside me, legs crossed, folder on his lap. Inside was the full package, everything. The doctored maps, the emails, the zoning letter, the video, all of it. When they opened the floor for public comment, I stood up. "I've got something to share," I said, loud, but not shouting. No drama, just firm. Karen's smile was already tightening. "I live down at the end of the East Trail. It's twice. You've probably heard my name passed around lately. Lot of talk going on about who owns what. Thought it'd be helpful to bring some clarity." I pulled out the folder and placed it on the table in front of the board. These are notarized documents from the county, a statement from zoning enforcement, and copies of emails between board members discussing illegal changes to official property lines. There were murmurs. Some people sat up straighter. One of the board members, a guy named Tom, who always looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, reached out and opened the folder, flipping through the first few pages. I kept going. I've also included a recording that proves Karen's son trespassed on my dock. The day she filed a police report claiming I threatened him. The report was false. The video shows he was alone, drinking, blasting music, and flipping off my house. No threats, no shoving, just entitlement. Now people were really paying attention. One woman leaned over to whisper something to the guy next to her. Another started taking notes. Karen finally stood up. She didn't raise her voice, not yet, but you could feel the heat coming off her. "This isn't the time or place for—" "No," I cut in. Calm, but not soft. "This is exactly the time and place, because what's in that folder isn't just embarrassing. It's criminal. Forging public records, manipulating maps, targeting a private citizen with false claims, that's not a misunderstanding. That's abuse of power." She looked like she was about to speak again, but Tom beat her to it. "We should review this," he said, tapping the folder. "Privately, as a board." "I agree," someone else added. "This is serious." Karen's face was turning that shade of red. People get when they realize the room isn't on their side anymore. She tried to recover, brushing it off like I was blowing things out of proportion. Tried to steer the conversation back to bigger picture community unity. That tired line she always threw out when she got backed into a corner, but the air had shifted. You could feel it. For the first time, the room wasn't bending toward her. They were leaning away. After the meeting, people started coming up to me, quietly. Some shook my hand. Others just nodded like they were finally seeing things clearly. One older guy, I think his name was Bill, lived up near the clubhouse, said, "Wish I'd spoken up earlier. We all knew something was off." That night, I went home and waited. I figured Karen wouldn't take it lying down, and she didn't. Not even close. The very next morning, I found the tires slashed on my truck. Both rear ones. Clean, straight cuts. Not random. Not desperate. It was deliberate, the kind of the message someone sends when they know they're losing but still want to throw one last punch. I called Denny. He showed up before I finished sweeping up the broken glass someone had tossed into my driveway. No fingerprints, no cameras on that side of the property, just a hunch. "You want a file?" he asked. "Already have," I said. We stood in silence for a moment. Then Denny added, "She's not going to stop." "Then I won't either." And I meant it, because after that meeting, everything changed. Karen and the board went into emergency mode. They called a closed session, sent out a panicked community-wide email talking about miscommunication and internal document errors. They didn't even try to deny it outright, just tried to blur it with soft language, tried to make it feel like an innocent glitch in an otherwise well-meaning system, but nobody was buying it anymore. Chris filed the cease and desist the following week, sent it straight to the HOA's attorney, and copied the board. Along with it, he submitted a formal complaint to the Attorney General's office. Not anonymously this time. We were done being quiet. And that's when Karen made her final mistake. One that would cost her everything. But I'll get to that soon. Let's just say, when you back a snake into a corner, you better be ready for it to strike. And when it does, you'd better be ready to finish the job. It happened quicker than I thought it would. One day, Karen was strutting through the neighborhood with that same little clipboard like nothing was wrong, giving people that smug nod she reserved for those who were still under the spell. And then, just like that, it all started unraveling. The email came from the state attorney general's office. Not to me, not directly. It went to the HOA board, county zoning, and a few people in the clerk's office. But you know how small towns are, doesn't take much for things to start leaking. And once they do, there's no putting that toothpaste back in the tube. I got wind of it through Jenna, who showed up at my workshop looking like she'd just walked out of a soap opera courtroom scene. "You didn't hear it from me," she said, handing me a printout, "but they're opening a formal investigation. Fraud, misrepresentation, abuse of position." I stood there holding that paper like it was made of gold leaf. The best part? It wasn't just about my case anymore. Turns out Karen had been pulling similar stunts with other properties along the HOA's edge, little edits here and there, creative interpretations of boundaries, pushing newer homeowners into optional fees that weren't optional at all. Manipulating the budget for lakefront trail maintenance funds that somehow never saw a dollar of actual maintenance. It was bigger than me now, and she knew it. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Word had spread. People brought their own chairs, their own notes, some even brought snacks like it was a damn town hall rally. And there was Karen, sitting at the head of the table in a beige pantsuit like she still had control over anything at all. She opened the meeting with the usual script, "Let's all remain civil. We have a lot to get through tonight," that kind of crap. But her voice didn't carry like it used to. It cracked a little when she said the word community. Then Tom, the board guy who'd barely spoken more than a dozen words since I met him, cleared his throat and asked her, right there in front of everyone, if she would step down voluntarily while the investigation was ongoing. The room went dead quiet. Karen blinked. That tight little smile flickered just for a second, then she went full politician. "This is clearly a misunderstanding. I've always acted in the best interest of Lakewood Estates, and did you sign off on the map changes yourself?" He cut in. She froze, because if you didn't, someone committed fraud under your watch, and if you did, then you committed it. That silence, it was thick. You could feel it in your teeth. People started murmuring. You could hear pages flipping, phones being unlocked. I saw one woman live streaming the whole damn thing to her Facebook. Another guy, the one who always complained about squirrels in the gutters, stood up and said, "We trusted you." Karen opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. Tom turned to the room. "We're holding a vote tonight to suspend the current president pending legal outcome. Emergency clause, bylaw, 3.6. Hands shot up like kids in a classroom. Some slow, some fast, but one by one they went up, nearly unanimous. She didn't even stay for the end of the meeting. She got up, grabbed her bag, and walked out like the building was on fire. No goodbye, no speech, just heels on tile and the soft click of the glass door swinging shut behind her. In the days that followed, it only got worse for her. The Attorney General's office sent formal requests for HOA financial statements going back 5 years. The local paper, the Lakewood Ledger, bless their gossipy little hearts, ran a front-page story. Lakefront dispute exposes HOA power abuse. They used her picture from the community barbecue last summer, where she was holding a flag cake and grinning like a small-town Martha Stewart. The contrast was poetic. Denny told me off the record that the slashed tire report had been tied to someone in her household. Not proven, not enough to press charges, but enough that her son got flagged in the system for patterns of nuisance behavior. I didn't need an arrest. The humiliation was enough. People started showing up at my place, apologizing, bringing me pie, for God's sake. One guy, a real estate agent, always wore salmon-colored polos, actually said, "I knew something was off, I just didn't want to rock the boat." I nodded, smiled, didn't rub it in. What was the point? The boat was already upside down. The new acting board president, surprisingly Tom, sent me a letter. Handwritten, not typed. It was short and honest. He thanked me for holding the line and said the board was working to revise their policies so something like this couldn't happen again. He even offered to fund the repairs for any damages I'd taken on, which, frankly, was more than I expected. I declined the money, but I appreciated the gesture. What I really wanted, though, I already had it. My land was safe. My name was cleared. The people who tried to erase me from the map got dragged into the light. And Karen? Well, she vanished for a while. House lights off. No tennis visor in sight. Rumor was she left town, maybe moved back east where she came from. Someone else said she was staying with family, to get her head straight. I don't know. Don't care. She lost more than just a position. She lost the illusion that she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. Funny thing is, I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. Like the lake after a storm. I sit on the end of the dock now more than I used to. I don't mean to. It just kind of happens. I'll come out with a cup of coffee in the morning, planning to check on some lumber or sweep out the shop, and instead I end up here, toes dangling just above the water, letting the quiet soak in. It's different now. Not louder, not quieter, just clearer. The air feels lighter. The lake feels like mine again. You wouldn't know any of this had happened if you were just passing through. The trees haven't changed. The wind still runs the same ripples across the water. Birds still fight over the same branches like they've got a mortgage on them. Everything looks the same, but I'm not. I see it all a little sharper now. There's a new private property sign near the trail. This one metal, county stamped, anchored in concrete. No more screws to pull out in the night. No more polite warnings. Just a cold, official declaration. Jenna helped get it approved through the zoning board, said it was the least they could do. Funny thing, people actually respect it now. Nobody wanders down anymore. No hammock strung between my trees. No kids pretending not to see the sign. It's not that I hate people. I don't. I just hate what happens when people forget what respect looks like. And out here, respect's the only thing that keeps peace alive. Denny still stops by sometimes. We don't talk about the mess much. Mostly we just drink a beer and argue about fishing lures. He told me he's been thinking about retiring early. Says it's not like it used to be. I told him nothing ever is. Jenna and I, well, we've been having dinner more often. Sometimes at her place, sometimes mine. She brings wine I can't pronounce, and I cook food that probably shouldn't be served with wine at all. But we laugh, and that's the point, right? The dock's in good shape again. I replaced a few planks that had warped and sealed the whole thing with marine-grade stain. Took me a weekend, but it felt right. Like tucking in a quilt someone else started. My dad would have liked that. No. He always said the dock was the heart of the property. Not the house, not the shop, the dock. It was where he taught me how to fish, where I proposed to my wife, where I sat with her the night before she passed. And now, it's where I sit when I need to remember who I am. There's something about water that holds things. Not just reflections, memories, voices, lessons. Sometimes I think I can still hear my dad out here. Not in a ghostly way, just in the echo of his wisdom, the weight of his silence. You don't back down just because someone's louder. You stand on the truth, or you don't stand at all. That stuck with me more than I ever realized. I didn't set out to become some kind of symbol or cautionary tale. I wasn't trying to change anything. I just wanted to be left alone. But the fight came anyway, and when it did, I stood up. Not because I wanted to be a hero, but because I didn't know how to sit down and watch it all get taken from me. There were moments I wanted to quit. Plenty. But now, sitting here in the fading light with the smell of pine and the sound of water slapping against the dock, I'm glad I didn't. Not because I won, not even because Karen lost, but because I'm still here, because the lake is still mine, and because peace earned tastes better than peace handed out like a favor. If I've learned anything from all this, it's that protecting what matters doesn't always look like a war. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's patient, and sometimes it looks a lot like a man on a dock, drinking coffee, watching the world forget it ever tried to push him off his own land. Let him forget. I never will.